So Axel has been running for nearly 10 years. We started off, of course, with our main Axel product. Then we launched Connectr, our automated media workflow engine. And most recently, we launched a Scribe, our transcription application. And for those of you who don't know of Scribe, it started off as being a panel for Premiere Pro to allow a Premiere Pro editor to transcribe directly from the panel inside the editor on single clips or on sequences. That then expanded into being an Axel option or feature, should I say, and a Scribe is now two separate standalone applications, one for Mac and one for PC. And it's one of the lowest cost transcription processes on the market. And you can just see more information about that by going to scribe.ai. The leadership team for Axel, of course, we've got Sam, Patrice, Katie, and Alex, who are all based in the US. We'll be hearing from Patrice and Alex later in the event. And I'm Neil Blake, as I mentioned, and I'm based in the UK office just outside London, and I look after the Europe, Africa, and Middle Eastern region. And of course, we all started with Axel, and many of our customers, even today, resonate and recognize this picture of drives. We help our customers make sense from this chaos. And we help people catalog their content, whether it's video, audio, or graphics. They can manually tag, or by using our automatic AI tools, they can add metadata to the files. And then, of course, they can search for content very quickly. We integrate with Premiere Pro, Final Cut 10, and Media Composer. And we can archive content to disk, tape, or cloud. One thing about Axel, it being radically simple, was everything was a manual process. And a lot of our customers wanted to automate functions in Axel, which gave birth to Connectr. And Connectr allows for automated process within Axel. And we've got over 600 customers, and we've got a few logos here. The cool thing about Axel is it doesn't just sit in the broadcast or post-production market. We've got clients in the banking industries, insurance companies. Of course, post and production are huge, and broadcast are huge. And we've also got some government organizations as well. So there's a lot of different people using Axel in different ways. And if I press the right button, we'll go forward. But it's all about Connectr today. Connectr is our automated workflow engine. And workflows are built using what we would call a unit. And the units are connected together, and that forms a workflow. And these could be to automate repetitive tasks, or automate even simple or more complex tasks. The units all have their own individual functions. And it's also possible to use JavaScripting, command line tools. And because we have API integration with a number of different systems, we can connect to different external applications. Connectr is a completely standalone product. You don't need Axel to run Connectr, but of course they do integrate very nicely. As I mentioned, the workflows are built from units, and a user can select a unit either by right-clicking on the mouse or by searching for the unit in the unit manager. And we'll be showing you examples of that later on. And new units, and the units are just dragged into the workspace. New units, to provide new functionality, can be added at any time as well, just by importing a new unit application or software package into the unit folder. And the units connect to each other to create the workflow, and these connections can either pass data or a simple trigger just to move the workflow through the individual units. And talking of triggers, there are a number of ways of triggering workflows. A lot of our demo workflows are just manual triggers, so we click a go button, but typically in the real world, the triggers are set to automate, so they will run every 5 minutes or every 10 minutes or every half an hour or something. And so these workflows will run without any user intervention. We have an example here of a small or simple workflow. This is to log into Axel, to do a search query based on file age, and then any files that equal to that search criteria are then archived. What we also have here is an OS notification, and in this case is if the client module does not log into Axel for some reason, the user will be notified. And these notifications can be on screen. It could also be an email notification as well. And the notifications can be anywhere within a workflow. So it might be at the very end of the workflow, emailing a user to say this workflow has completed. Here's a slightly more complex workflow. I'm not going to go into huge amounts of detail, but what this was doing was taking a watch folder where MP3 files were arriving. We were converting them to .wav files. And then the client wanted these WAV files copied to 5 different folders. However, within each different folder, they wanted the names to be slightly different. So during the copy process to each folder, we modified the name based on the customer criteria. And then at the end of the workflow, we then cleared out the original MP3 files to clean up the original watch folder. And this workflow would just sit running automatically throughout the days. And as I mentioned, Connectr is a standalone product, but through our API integration, we connect tightly with Axel. Now, at this point, what I'd like to do is hand across to my colleague, Alex, who will tell you why Connectr is so useful. Then we will talk about some customer workflows. So, Alex, over to you.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Neil. Good morning and good afternoon to everybody. So Connectr really is, from our point of view, an invaluable tool for especially small and medium-sized work groups. What it really addresses is that painful but necessary aspect of everybody's job, and those are repetitive tasks that have to be done, but frankly are not really, at the end of the day, either profitable or billable. You know, when you think about backing up files, renaming them as we just saw, or archiving based on file dates, you know, these are all frankly absolutely vital tasks that have to happen on a regular basis. They're the same task each time from a sequence point of view, and they take up your time, and yet at the end of the day you can't really leverage that into more revenue or more profitability for your firm. So it's just really, at the end of the day, these things are they're a drag on your business. Connectr completely eliminates this. It's really an amazing tool in that respect of allowing you to focus on the tasks that really deliver value to your customers, focus on the creative process that video really, demands so much of, and again, make your firm more valuable to its clients. So that's the first thing that we really believe in, and it's connected to the other. Sorry to use the word, but it is connected to the next aspect, and that's that. Many of our customers say, well, we don't have enough work. We're not a big enough firm. There's just 2, or there's just 5 of us, or there's just a few people in the firm. And that's actually speaks right to the essence of it. Connectr as a product fits perfectly in the small to mid-sized work group that you find so much in the video space, because it's not the most expensive application. No, it's not cheap, but on the other hand, when you think about what you could do with the 4-flow or 8-flow connector, it's just incredible. Basically, what Connectr allows you to do is to scale the capabilities of your team by a factor of 2, possibly 3 times. So, now all of a sudden your firm is capable of getting out somewhere north of double the amount of work that they were before, simply because now they're just focusing on, again, the creative process, delivering content, relevant and engaging content for your clients. And that's really, really gives you that leverage for, by focusing your talents where they're best applied, and letting it do that grunt work, frankly, in the background. And then finally, it's just incredibly flexible. I mean, Neil showed you, whether it's a command line, a Java, the API, web services, Connectr really, it's amazingly flexible in what you can do with it. So, the idea is, when you implement connector that you'll automate everything out of the gate, but that you can build your automation schemes over time. So focusing, first on the most, pressing and immediate, and also from a technical point of view, relatively simple matters such as archiving based on file date. So you save your tier one storage for the jobs that are live, things like that. And then building, as you'll see over time for connector, you'll see something that you realize, was once thought of as a interactive task as well. Actually, it's fairly repetitive, and we could probably automate this, whether it's with a script or running a command line application or whatever. So it allows you that flexibility to develop additional automation routines as time goes on, because automation is a process. It's not a specific thing. So you're going to automate one thing, then another thing, and over time. And connector is going to be basically the platform on which this happens. So we feel that those three core things are just incredibly useful and valuable to our customers. And that's what makes us so jazzed and excited about the connector product. So, Neil?
Thanks, Alex. That was great. We're going to talk about some customer workflows now. The first two are from customers in the US, and I'm going to ask my colleague Patrice to talk about them. And then we've got some from Europe, which I will talk about. So I'm going to change the slide and then ask Patrice to talk about the Broadcast Store. Over to you, Patrice.
Thank you, Neil. So Broadcast Store is actually a company that will digitize tape and deliver them to their clients. So now they are using Axle in terms of retrieving clips depending on the client's demand. So Axle is the lightweight media management system. And so they will create the clip using connectors based on the customer requirements. They are going to be stored in Axle. So that will be for the browse copy, or the main high-res will be then copied to a deliverable drive. That will be a verified copy. And also another second set of drives that will be shared for safekeeping. Now, it is very important, as everybody mentioned, that these are repetitive tasks. Checking whether or not the file is valid before delivery or safekeeping will take time and is not billable. And this is why they actually use connector to automate the whole process. They only have a watch folder. Everything goes from start to finish automatically. They can focus on another job. Now, we do have also another interesting workflow we have done in the United States, and the company is called connectr. Just as the name suggests, they are doing VR videos, so you have left and right eye, and sometimes even more. So connector is being used to analyze the video, and based on different set of criteria, we are going to create the browse copy or low resolution proxy for the Axle system. And we are also going to feed the metadata to it. And this is how the solution looks like, basically. Next slide, please, Neil.
Just one slide for this one.
Oh, yes, there's one. Sorry about that. Thank you. So we have a watch folder, drop the files, and depending, because they have multiple different cameras, we have a huge amount of rules that will then provide the proper left eye proxy. So they only have one eye to focus on, as well as the metadata. And again, from a watch folder point of view, everything is done automatically, and they can just focus on tagging or finding the clip that they need. And with that, Neil, back over to you.
Thank you for that. The next project we'd like to talk about is one that is in Spain. And what we have here is a client in Madrid who wants to back up their content to a data center in Madrid, which in turn is then replicated into Barcelona. And they also have a number of external facility companies that they work with, and also they have a number of basically TV stations that they deliver their end product to. And we have a mix of Axle for the media management, connector to do the copying of the files to the appropriate watch folders, and then we have File Catalyst to do the high-speed secure delivery to the external locations. An Axle user would select the clips that they want to deliver to the external facilities, so there'd be a metadata field for each individual facility. Connector would monitor these metadata fields and then copy the files to the appropriate watch folder. File Catalyst picks up the files and then transfer them back. When the remote user has completed the project, they can return the file using a watch folder that's in their facility, which will bring it back to the main data center in Madrid. And again, Connectr will pick this up and pass it to Axel for review. When the process is completely finished, the client can then select the clips that they want to deliver to their customer, the TV stations. And again, they can select different metadata fields in Axel to select that the file has been approved, and this is the client they want to send it to. And again, Connectr will pick the files up, copy them to a folder location, and then that will be then transmitted via File Catalyst. And during these file copies that Connectr is doing, we're always doing an MD5 checksum on the files. And also when we're transferring files from the customer facility to the main data center, we're also doing MD5 checksums on anything that's moved. Another large client we have this time in Italy with Mediaset. This is an interesting project. We're using Axel and Connectr and MOG in this case. The customer has two large production systems. They have what we call a flat file system, which is predominantly Premiere Pro, and they have a very large Avid Interplay system. And Axel is managing the files in the main Premiere archive, and then also initiating transfers into the Avid Interplay system. In this case, it's all based on Linux. They were this Axel version of Linux, Connectr version of Linux, and it's all set in the Mediaset data center. The first workflow is for clips delivery to the editors. So they select the small sections of clips using our bins. Connectr is monitoring the bins, and any files that appear in the bins, Connectr runs a process to create new small files from the in-points and the out-points marked by the user, and then they are delivered to another Axel catalog. From there, the end user can start to download them. One interesting point about Premiere Pro workflows is the Axel proxy files that we create are valid to use in the Premiere Pro high-res, low-res workflows. The integration with Interplay uses the tools from MOG. Again, the user in Axel would select the clips that they want to send to Interplay. Connectr will pass the clips and the metadata from Axel to a watch folder. The MOG will pick these files up, transfer them to Avid OP Atoms, and then check the metadata and the file into the Avid Interplay system. For the return trip, the Interplay user dumps the files into an export folder, which is picked up by MOG, and MOG transfers that file and the metadata across to the archive while converting it to an OP1A, and then imports the XML metadata file into Axel. So it's all very straightforward, but very cool, and all automated. And I have one more customer here again in the UK. They are a religious organization. They have remote editors, and they have Axel, and they also have Archiware for LTO. And what we're doing is we have Axel and Connectr and Archiware with an MLogic dual LTO archive. Their editors log into the system. They select the clips that they want, again, using the bin structure. Typically, the customer's clips are an hour to an hour and a half long, but the editors only maybe want a few minutes of each clip. And Connectr is looking at these bins, creating new clips, and then pushing them to a Google Drive folder for the editors to download. The archiving process is with Archiware, in this case with a dual MLogic tape, which is set up to do dual copies. So there's the main and the backup. And we have many dozens of installations with Axel and Archiware. The Axel user will select the clips that they want to archive. That creates a job, which is then passed to Archiware, and then they take files from the main storage and copy them to the LTO. On completion of the job, the information is passed back to Axel, and the LTO information then appears as metadata. Now it's time for the connector demo. So I'd like to, I'm going to stop sharing my screen now, and I will hand over to Patrice, who will walk through the main connector demo. Thank you.
Thank you, Neil. Already, so Neil already brushed a little bit on the user interface of connector. You have here in the middle the main drawing area. We have the log messages. This is where you will find the error warning and everything you may need while you develop the workflow. And on the right side panel, you have different tools such as creating more than one workflow, multiple workflows, creating variables that you can then use for passing along data, get information of different units, searching units. That's very useful. If I search, for example, for database access, I will find different database access. We have also corresponding icons, layout arrangements, and monitoring, how much time it takes or how much memory we use. And you always have at the bottom right here the memory allocated and used by your workflow. Now let's do a quick and simple run through, and that will be something that we just do a print hello world, just to give you an idea of how it works. You can right click and find something that you need. So we see each category is going from movie, doing math, image manipulation, and everything. I'm going to just have a button to trigger a workflow. And this is something we typically do for demos, but in reality, you will have something that will be scheduled or going on a loop. So you don't have to worry about the workflow when it's just running. And let's do a quick search. We want just to print a string, for example. And here is my string. Now I have these two units. You will see this triangle. If I zoom in, you will see that we have triangles here that will allow me to go and manage the flow. You have also triangle, and notice that we have always success and failure. And these circles here, they are what we call port. This is the kind of information that we can pass along from one unit to another. So if it is on the right side, you will be able to pass. If it is on the left, you can receive, or you can directly edit here, hello world. And now let me clear this log. You will see at the bottom, we are going to print hello world. Let's run the project. Project is running. Notice you can also do stepping. Hit trigger, and here we go, hello world. So this is just a quick overview of how you design stuff, but it's kind of boring to watch me do it. So let's see other workflows, simple and more complex, and why some of the companies we discussed about used connector. And with that, I'm just going to load this, the first workflow here. Here we go. There is a lot to unpack here in this workflow. So you will notice that we have a trigger tick that will actually run every second. We are going to run command line tool. In this case, I'm simply grabbing the date and I subtract 2 weeks worth of seconds. And the reason I'm doing that is that I'm creating a search string, a search query that I'm saving as a variable. Remember, we mentioned that the variables can then be reused. And I have the second workflow, which will run in parallel. You can have more than one workflow running in parallel. And again, every second, I'm going to connect to my Axel system, perform the search, and the goal will be to archive, except we don't want to wait for my system to archive. So what we are going to do, actually, let's trigger the workflow. And you will see the different pulses. Moving on to the first, you will see how the value change. Notice how I pass along information from one to the other. And see how every second I update my search string. And if I check my Axel system, you will see that I will have, sorry, you will see that I update also the search every second. And while I am running the project, you can still make some changes. I'm just going to print this array, and I will go through, send this array. I can send to multiple aspects, multiple units, the same data, going through. And here we go. And if we were to find something, it will have printed there. Let's make a quick change so we can actually see what I'm talking about. Let's make it actually older than 2 weeks ago. It will find pretty much everything. And here we go. And we are waiting for the result now. It will actually take some time and bring me the results. And here you have the results. So you notice that when I actually run the project, I can edit it. We are going to open another example that will not connect to Axel. And in this case, we are simply going to have a watch folder, go through the content, do a checksum, and copy the file to Dropbox. So let's see which watch folder I have. On my desktop, I have a connector watch folder right here, currently empty. And as a destination, I have Dropbox and Dropbox upload. So let's check that. It is not empty, so just to be on the safe side, delete everywhere. So again, I'm going to do a checksum and do a verified copy to my Dropbox folder. So let's run a project. Let's drop some files into my watch folder. And we have some very short videos here. Videos for connectors, they are very short, so it will be relatively fast. Connector watch folder, paste, and let's run. And here we are. We did the verified copy. They are available, and they just got uploaded to my Dropbox. I did now. Other delivery method that you can have would be upload to Vimeo, upload to an FTP or to YouTube. So you have more different ways, in addition to copy, to deliver the media after it has been verified and copied. And last but not least, let's talk a little bit of what is new with Connector 2020 and a new example workflow that will be distributed with it, which will be to create editing proxies for your editors that will need to edit remotely. That will be a much more complex project, as you can see here. Slightly bigger. So we have actually new units in Connector 2020 that will allow you to change either the text field or the radio button or even a slider where I can change the bitrate of what I want to create, 720p. And I'm going to update here the watch folder. And I'm going to take the connector watch folder. Notice how I can drag and drop the folder, make it very easy. And same thing for my output folder. Going back to the desktop, I have an output folder and going here. So what this is going to do? It is going to go through the watch folder, get through the files, and have different steps depending on the height I have set in my earlier. And we are then going to just store the height of my proxy, of the editing proxy that I want to create. And the bitrate is also passed from earlier. And we are just going to render. Going through the process of recreating the same folder structure in my output folder so I know where it is going through. And from there, we are going to render FFmpeg. The same slider unit, I'm actually going to use it to have the progress of my transcode. So the goal will be, I have Harvest Media. I need to make editing proxies for people who are remote and can edit easily, or download smaller files than the 8K or 4K footage that I have. Running the project, it is going to go through. and it will find the different files and see the progress it is going through. Now let's take a look at the output folder. Users, Axel, desktop. So this is exactly the same folder structure. So I know which file I'm dealing with. And notice how these files are MP4s and here I have a MOV. The reason is because I need to simply do an audio pass-through. So the audio will be passed through. The video track will be smaller, but the audio will be passed through. And you will have then all the audio tracks that you need for editing remotely. And from Premiere or any other NLE that you decide to use, you can then relink the media. Now, Premiere has the cool stuff of toggling between high-res and proxies. And you can use the proxy that you create from Connector to edit directly from the proxies and render on the high-res without having the relinking process. And with that, this is the end of the demo. And I'm going to head it back over. Thank you very much, and see if we have any questions.
Thanks, Patrice. So if there are any questions, we have a few minutes left. Please feel free to either type them into the chat field or type them into the Q&A section that we're monitoring here. As with Axel, where we can provide trial versions, we can also provide trial versions of Connector. And there are two different versions. There's a Mac version of Connector and a Linux version of Connector. And we basically license Connector on the number of workflows that are available to run at any one particular time. So one of the things that we can do is we can have different workflows running in parallel at the same time, running different processes. And the license, you can have 4, you can have 8, you can have 12 workflows all running simultaneously. And of course, you have to think about the power of the host machine with the larger number of workflows as well.
And the more video you need to transcode, the more cores will be desirable in terms of transcoding from Connector. And you can have a much more affordable multi-core machine on Linux that you can have on Mac. There's a question, Neil, and would be actually, what is the cost for Connector?
Let me just look that up. I haven't got my price book open, but I can open that very quickly.
So while we wait, sorry to put you on the spot. While we wait, we have 2 tiers of pricing, multiple tiers, of pricing, depending on the number of simultaneous workflows that you are running. And it's either available as a one-time purchase for a perpetual license, or if you're not sure or need a short-term project, we also have a SaaS model available.
So the four workflow version of Connector for Mac is just under $4,000 for 4 workflows. Around about 5,000 for 6 workflows, and around about 6.5 for 8 workflows. And as I say, we can provide trial licenses.
Yeah. And one thing to note is the cost is reflecting on how many simultaneous processes and not how many features you got. You will have other systems similar to Connector that will do workflow automation, and they are going to charge you X, and suddenly you need to transcode in a pro format, you need to pay an additional module tool, and so on. Connector is what we have showed you is what you will get, and some you will have even more features. We also included image processing, for adding effects and so on. So all of that will be available. And we have another question. Your workflow is very powerful. Do your competitors have anything like it? Jennifer, I will assume you're talking about editing remotely, creating the remote proxies. Possibly, I'm not entirely sure what they have done, but any kind of tool that can create, that can transcode, will be able to create also the editing proxy for remote editing. Now, that being said, if you use, for example, Telestream Vantage, in terms of transcoding, you need a lot more money to transcode different codecs. So this is how Telestream will make their money. Whereas again, connector starting at $4,000, you can have that ready to rock and roll. Hope I answered your question, Jennifer. Cloud integration, a question about cloud integration. We do have some cloud integration, which we are still developing. Happy to test that with you. We have direct integration with S3, and we have direct integration with Azure as well. So S3, we are talking about Wasabi or Amazon. Cool thing is, because I showed you we have the command line tool integration, you can use something like Arclone and integrating with other kind of cloud technology. Thank you. These are all very good questions.
And where a workflow or an integration doesn't exist, they can easily be created and added. Each unit is basically a separate file within a connector folder. So it's easy to update the existing units to add new features and also add new integrations altogether.
Yeah, that is a very good point, Neil. We actually do provide an SDK doc and an SDK. It is all Java based. So, or if you have somebody that can code Java, they can create their own little units and just be added.
And as I say, if you would like a one-on-one demo, please get in contact. We could set up another Zoom meeting just to talk about your particular requirements, and we can go into more detail. And if there were any other specific points of integration you wanted to talk about, we could do that offline as well.
What about API? I have a question for API. I'm going to gather that you're talking about accessing connector via REST API, which we do have, a REST API that will allow you to directly connect and trigger workflows remotely and also pass information. If it is to actually make API calls from connector to another vendor, we also have this capability. You have the possibility to make HTTP requests, which will be again REST API, the core standard. We can understand XML files and JSON and everything, so you can use any kind of scripting tools that is at your disposal to do all of that. As Neil mentioned earlier during the presentation, we do have also direct integration with JavaScript command line tools, so you can call Python, you can call PHP from that. Or you can directly develop via Java. I mean, the Axel module is actually a Java module that is using Axel's API, REST API. But do know that there is also a unit that will allow you to make direct REST calls. I don't see any more questions. So again, we can easy to set up a trial. Our email addresses are fairly simple. We are still small enough that we use simply our first name at axel.ai. So my email address will be Patrice, Patrice, at axel.ai. Neil's will be Neil at axel.ai. Alex is Alex at axel.ai. And Katie will be Katie at axel.ai.
Thanks, Patrice. So if there are no more questions, we will wrap it up for today. Thank you very much for your time, and we look forward to talking to you again in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you very much.